I am really excited about this series, Giving Birth to Your Greatness. And here's why. When I was in the Navy, we went to Hong Kong, and I was under strict orders from my lovely wife and actually my mother-in-law to make sure that I sent them back some sets of china. No, well, Hong Kong is known for its china. When you get home, if you probably check the seal on yours, provided your china is not bootleg, it might be stamped Hong Kong. And so the merchant who sold the china they were right there on the dock off the ship, Earl, and once we got off the ship, we could purchase the china, and I purchased a set for my wife, I purchased a set for my mom, I purchased a set for my mother-in-law, as I was under strict instructions to do, and the merchant sold, packaged, and shipped the china, so there was nothing else for me to do. So once I was done with the one thing, say he had one job. Once I was done with my one job, me and some of my guys, we went out to the Kowloon side, and when we got to the Kowloon side, we were told that that's where some of the best shopping in Hong Kong is. And I believe that. You wouldn't know it, but I did. In some of my earlier days here, I wore straight up Kowloon Hong Kong suits right here to Christ Universal Temple. But while we were shopping, there were a couple of my other guys who were interested in getting some tattoos. And so we stopped in this tattoo parlor. And my guys were looking at the tattoos, and there was this one particular tattoo that caught all of our attention. And that tattoo read, "Born Loser." True story. It read, "Born Loser." And so one of my guys asked the lady who was helping us, he said, "What makes a person get the tattoo that says "Born Loser"?" And she said, "Before tattoo is ever inked on body, tattoo is etched in mind." So you would be surprised at the number of people who are walking around with some sense that they are born to lose. As a matter of fact, some research, a number as high as 85% suggested that 85% are walking around believing that they do not deserve the love, grace, and mercy of God. They do not believe that they are worthy of the goodness of God. They have low self-esteem, and that low self-esteem impacts and impedes their ability to accept what has already been prepared for them. Now, because you have been here, I imagine that you are not necessarily a part of that 85%, but I don't want to make any assumptions. And here's why. Because the experiences of life can have a tendency of grading on us in such a way that we begin to see ourselves through the lens of our problems rather than through the lens of our possibilities. Sometimes life can get so heavy that even the hint of greatness causes us to be unsettled in our souls. And so what I hope on this morning and through this series is that there will be some unsettling for some of you. I hope that there is something that is said or presented that presents in you what we call a chemicalization and structural tension. I hope it makes you uneasy to hear that there is greatness in you. Why do I hope it makes you uneasy? Because it means that the mere thought of the greatness is challenging the belief that you are somehow less than. I hope to make you uneasy during this series. I hope to make you uncomfortable. Because I don't want you to believe that just because you believe something, what you believe is so. How many of you know you can believe a thing, and just because you believe it, that doesn't make it true? So I hope to make us just a little bit uncomfortable. Because if in the event that you fall into that 85% of people who don't believe that they're worthy, who don't believe that you deserve, who don't believe that you are entitled to, and I don't mean like entitled to like just because you showed up entitled to, I mean just because of how you are made entitled to. Are you with me? Generally speaking, when it comes to the ability to experience life, there is really only two things that interrupt our ability to experience the flow. And one of those things is the belief that we are not worthy enough. Now, this might not be you. If it's not you, it's all good. But if it's you, you know who you are. Am I right about it? And so for those of you who find yourself believing that you are not worthy, no matter how much you produce, no matter how much you generate, no matter how much you give, no matter how much happiness you bring, no matter how much people affirm you, if you believe that you are not deserving and that you are not great, this is for you. For those of you who had your greatness, the sense of greatness, robbed from you because somebody touched you in inappropriate ways, I'm talking to you. For those of you who believed you had the great relationship, and when the relationship fell apart, your sense of who you were fell apart, I'm talking to you. For those of you who had the job and the status and the things that said to the world, I have arrived, I've made it. And when those things start to be taken away from you, and you no longer had those things to point to as an indication of what you could do, I'm talking to you. I said we were with in the Spirit yesterday, and the Behind the Walls ministry yesterday at Cook County Jail, and I said to the ladies who were there, I said it's a heck of a thing when the dirt that you do gets you the thing that you want and you still feel empty. Like, what do you do when you have the cars and you have the money and you have the women and you have the clothes, but you still feel empty? None of those things could feel what was already present, but because I believed, I could not experience it. I'm talking to you. Because whether I know you or not, here is what I know about you. There is greatness in you. And you didn't put it there. And so we all begin like a gymnast. See, self-value is really only a perception. Somebody repeat after me. Self-value is only a perception. All of us begin like a gymnast. All of us start with the perfect 10. And then when we start to make mistakes, we start to make errors, we start to deduct from our 10. When you cheat on your taxes, you deduct from your 10. I'm sure I'm trying to help you before they catch you. When you lie in your relationship, you deduct from your 10. When you say you're going to do things for yourself and you don't do them, you deduct from your 10. See, those things begin to impact your sensibilities as it relates to the greatness that has been placed in you. You didn't give it to yourself. You can't take it from yourself, but you can ignore it. Are you with me? And so self-determination is just a perception. And as you hear about this greatness that is within you, and it begins to cause the chemicalization in your soul, just know that that's a good thing. When those seeds are being planted and it begins to disrupt your sense of self, just know that's a good thing. See, every now and again, you ought to be upset. See, unless your life is exactly as you desire it to be, you should not be comfortable unless you have the amount of money and the amount of joy and the amount of peace and the amount of healthy relationships and the amount of health in your body. This is no time to compromise and settle just because you've gotten this far. If God didn't stop, what makes you think you can? Not if you're going to give birth to your greatness. Now, it's cool if you just want to give birth to your averageness. Average-ness? Average-ness? Ness? Does that need two nesses? Just one ness? Average-ness. If you, listen, if all you want to do is give birth to being average health, meaning the right hand works, but the left one doesn't. Average peace. When I'm around these people, I got it. When I'm around these people, I don't. Average prosperity. Enough to pay this bill, but not enough to pay that bill. I'm not talking about giving birth to average. This is not for the person who is content with being average. This is not your lesson. That lesson is later in the year, when we do It's a Wonderful Life in December. You want to be here for that. But if average is not good for you, if great is what you intend to strive for, if you intend to say yes to the manifestation of what has been placed in you, then you've got to stay moving. You've got to stay in action. Are you with me? Because there is greatness in you. But greatness cannot be manifested through an average mind. Write that down, tweet that, post that, put that on your mirror for the year. Greatness cannot be manifested through an average mind, through an average mindset. It will not manifest itself through an average consciousness. It can't. Are you with me? And so I want you to experience some chemicalization. I want you to experience some structural tension. Because here is what I also know about you. Woo-hoo. Your life works perfectly. Here's what I mean by that. By and large, it produces after the thoughts you hold and the feelings, the thoughts you think and the feelings you hold. And if it works perfectly, yet it's not working for you, it's time to change. Would you agree? And so what I want us to do is look at how we give birth and manifestation to the greatness, but I want us to do it as we look at it through the creative process, But I'm going to deviate from how we do it in some ways. See, when we talk about the creative process, we find in the Genesis narrative that God gives us 6 days of creation. Is that right? And when we look at that experience through metaphysical eyes, or when we interpret it through metaphysical eyes, what we recognize is that the process is giving us, the process by which God creates is giving us a process by which you and I can create. It's also pointing us back to the evolution of the soul. Are you with me? And so the first step in the creative process is to let there be light. Somebody say, let there be light. Now, because we know how the story ends, I want to take you to the end and then bring you back. Is that all right? So then let's go to chapter 3 in Genesis. We start in the beginning where God said, let there be, yes. And then as we matriculate through the Genesis narrative, we get to chapter 3. And an interesting thing happens in chapter 3. Somebody ask, what happens in chapter 3? I'm glad you asked. In chapter 3, we are introduced to the serpent. Anybody familiar with the serpent? All right. And raise your hand. I'm going to blow up your whole spot. Raise your hand if you're not familiar with the serpent. You're like, you're not going to tell me you're going to blow up my spot and then I'm going to help you blow up my spot. Right? So scratch that question. But the serpent appears. The serpent let me go back for a second. Whenever you are reading the Bible metaphysically, we understand that the Bible represents states and stages of consciousness and states and stages of evolution. Is that right? So then the people, the character, the places, they all represent the activity of something that's happening within you and I. Are you with me? So when we read or hear about the serpent, we're not talking about some imp with a pitchfork or a tail. What we're talking about is some activity of sense consciousness happening within you and I. Are you with me? So then when we meet the serpent in chapter 3, the senses, the sense consciousness begins to get active in the garden. Are you with me? So if you remember from Genesis 1, there is a garden that's created, and Adam and Eve are in the garden, and everything is gravy, everything is lovely. Somebody repeat after me. In the garden, everything is lovely. But who in their right mind would make a choice that would get them kicked out of the garden? What would make someone make a choice, say choice, what would make someone make a choice that would get them kicked out of the garden? Are you with me? But I'm not really just talking about what happens in the scripture. I'm talking about what happens in us. Are you still with me? So the serpent introduces itself to the woman, say the woman. When we talk about, say it louder, don't relax. Relax. We're talking about states and stages of consciousness, yes? So when you hear me say woman, you should think feeling. Are you with me? So now say woman louder. Woman. There you go. So when the serpent introduces itself to the woman, the serpent, the sense nature, begins to influence how we feel. We're going somewhere. We're going somewhere. See, here is what I'm trying to help you see. What's the use of having a garden experience if you can't maintain it? What's the use of getting what you're praying for if you don't have the consciousness to maintain it? There's a reason why 50% of marriages end in divorce. There's not enough consciousness to maintain them. There's a reason why most lottery winners end up broke. There's not enough consciousness to maintain it. So let's look at what trips us up so that in the event that we get there, we can walk around the landmine and not be tripped up by what potentially can interrupt our good. Are you with me? So the serpent speaks to the woman, the feeling nature, yes? And it begins to school her about what is and isn't acceptable. Now, how many of you know that in your own life, you don't have to raise your hands, in your own life, God has already told you, you've heard it in the whispering of the still small voice, you heard it in your prayers, you heard it in your vision, you heard it in your meditation, you feel it in your heart, that God has said this to you, and then something else starts to speak to you. There's some other mind that starts to talk to you. There's some other sense of negativity that turns you away from what you heard the promise of the Lord being, and you begin to be swayed away from what God said and toward whatever this other voice is that's talking to you. So you know that God is your health, but what's this other thing that I keep feeling? Are you with me? And so the serpent begins to influence Eve, the woman, and the woman influences the man, Adam. And so now we have this experience wherein they have decided to eat from the one thing that they've been told they've not been able to eat from. And it produces an experience, and here is the experience. Now God shows up. And God says, Adam, where are you? Because of what Adam has decided to do, now Adam is hiding. Are you with me? And so the first thing I need you to do in order to prepare yourself to give birth to your greatness is I need you to ask and answer the question, where are you? Here's why. Because if you begin to give birth to something, or if you decide to produce something, or if you decide to go somewhere and you are not clear about where you are, what's with you in the beginning will always impact where you end up in the end. Are you with me? So now let me show you how Adam interrupts his flow in the garden aside from just eating from the tree. Are you with me? You have to know where you are. So you have to know where you are. Put that in your notes. Where am I? Ask and answer that question. Where am I? When God says, Adam, where are you? Check out what Adam does. Adam says, here I am. But then he says, here is how I got this way. See, it's what Adam does, I believe, is well known but little understood. What Adam does is he blames the woman. He blames what he feels, but God never spoke to the feeling to say, don't you do. God spoke to Adam to say, don't you do. So sometimes we are not allowing the thinking nature to rule like it wants to rule, or rule like it's designed to rule. Instead, we're moved by how I feel. I don't feel like going to work. I don't feel like speaking to you. I don't feel like getting dressed up. I don't feel like going out. I don't feel like having peace. I don't feel like. Sometimes you need to put your feelings on the shelf and get your mind right and start to think your way out of what you're going through. But not only does he not take responsibility, one, two, he blames the way he feels. And here's the real smooth move. He really actually blames God. Because he said, really, Lord, if you want to be truthful with it, it's the woman you gave me. So I would be better, God. Oh, my goodness, I'm talking to you. I would be better, God, if you answered my prayers sooner. I would be better, God, if you came through with the promise sooner. See, I wouldn't be as anxious, God, if in the moment that I prayed, you answered. Oh, don't miss it, don't duck. Because here is the promise: before you call, I will answer. But sometimes we call and we're not ready to take responsibility. Are you with me? So not only does Adam refuse to take responsibility, what he also does, and you need to put this in your notes because this is how we trip ourselves up and get ourselves pushed out of the blessing of the Edenic consciousness. Next, when he chooses, say chooses, see, it is the thinking nature that is responsible for what I choose. Are you with me? So when he chooses to eat what has been presented to him, when he chooses to eat what he's thinking, not what he's thinking, when he chooses to eat or touch what he sees or what he feels or what he hears or what he tastes, how many of you know that sometimes what you taste just ain't good for you? Listen, just yesterday, I had 2 slices of sweet potato pie. Just yesterday. I was down 15 pounds from my goal earlier in the year. And I decided, I decided that between Thanksgiving and Christmas, that I would live was yesterday after Christmas? And listen, it's just how it smelled. Right? It just smelled good. And then I cut it. And I tasted it. And it tastes good. My God. And then the senses kicked in. And Ron, one slice wasn't enough. So listen. Now I made a commitment. Hear me. I made a commitment from Thanksgiving to Christmas. I'm going to get my flow on. It's all good. I've lost 22 pounds more than once. I know how to do it. But if the commitment is between Thanksgiving and Christmas, then the 29th falls after Christmas. It might be okay to let the senses have one piece of pie, but why you got to get all bogus and have two pieces of pie? So the thinking nature, it compromises, it settles. I'm talking to you. See, it compromised for what it could see. It settled for what it could see. It settled for what it could get, even though there were other possibilities available. How many of us, oh my God, settle in relationships where they no longer feel like they used to feel? How many of us have taught ourselves how to accept and settle what's less than we know we deserve? How many of us submit ourselves to indignant conversations, giving our listening over to people who have no right to speak into our lives? We learn how to settle for less than. And whenever you make the compromise and settle for less, it comes at the risk of what you've already been promised in the garden. Are you with me? Second thing you have to be able to do, once you know where you are, second thing you have to be able to do is you have to be able to manage the darkness without fear. So I'm going back now to Genesis, because I want you to know how the story ends, how your experience in Eden ends in your soul. I want you to know how it ends in your soul if you don't take responsibility for creating in your life. You must repeat after me. I must take responsibility for everything that shows up in my life. I must take responsibility for everything that shows up in my life. See, I may not be able to choose what happens, but I am eminently equipped to choose how I respond. Are you with me? And so Adam abdicates his ability to respond. Not only does he do that, he compromised and settled for what was available just because it was available. Sometimes you have to let people know that the best of what they call themselves giving you just is not enough. That will not do if you intend to be in this atmosphere. It's all right if you know what you want. Second thing you have to be able to do is you have to be able to manage the darkness without fear. Here is what I mean. We see back now at Genesis 1, when God is getting ready to start this creative process, he calls forth out of what? He calls the light forth out of the darkness. Are you with me? And see, when we are children, when we're younger, sometimes we misunderstand the darkness. The darkness can be unsettling for us because we don't know what's in the darkness. But here is why I submit to you that God is not intimidated by the darkness. Because God knows that the only thing that can come out of the darkness is that which has the potential that is consistent with God in the darkness. Are you with me? So God can call forth light out of darkness because God knows God put light into darkness. You can manage your darkness, your difficulty, your adversity, your hardship, but it depends on what you have planted in the dark depths of your soul. What have you planted to help you deal with the difficulty when it shows up? See, if you ain't planted nothing, you can't expect nothing. And so sometimes the darkness scares us because we don't know what to expect. But I submit to you that if you but understand the law of mind action, you can only reap what you've been sowing. You can only get back what you planted in the darkness. Are you with me? And so the chaos, say chaos, that is symbolic with the darkness, the chaos or the darkness represents the potential. It does not represent the demise. It represents your potential. See, you really got it going on when you know how to transform the dark experiences into what you need them to be. See, somebody ought to hold this idea in their mind. All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and who are called according to your purpose. I intend to make it work together for my good. Are you with me? So you just have to know how to manage the darkness without being afraid. You got to know how to manage the darkness without fear, because the darkness does show up. The darkness is often at the beginning of your manifestation of your greatness. The darkness can be the doubt. As I said to you earlier, like it just doesn't seem like I'm going to be up to this. That's darkness. It doesn't seem like this time we're going to be able to get through. That's darkness. I keep calling, but they won't answer. Where are they? That's darkness. Another month, not enough money. How we going to do it? That's darkness. But planted in the darkness, oh my God, is the seed of greatness. So if you will call forth the seed, it's got to give its life to you. The last thing I need you to do, last point, put this in your notes as you prepare to give birth to your greatness. Let your light shine. Wherever you go, let your light shine. Now, we understand that life is, put this in your notes, light is the understanding of the principle. Are you with me? Light is the understanding of the principle. Light is not the awareness of the principle. It's the understanding of the principle. See, it's one thing to know about a thing. It's a whole nother to understand it, so much so that the beauty and power of the principle has to give out to you. You have to know, just like God, how to call on the principle so that it can manifest the good that you desire. You have to know how to call on the principle and how to direct the principle so that it can support you in this idea that you are great. You have to know how to work the principle, because our founder told us that it works if you work it. But if you don't know how to work it, you will manifest and still not have the good desires of your heart. So what I want to remind you of is that you have to know how to understand and work the principle. Because when you work it, it will work. Are you with me? If you work it, and you let yourself believe that there is greatness in you, that greatness must manifest itself. And that greatness will manifest itself not only in the way you show up, but it will manifest itself in what you have to show up with. So you need health in your body, start to call forth the greatness of the health that is. You don't have to use your own health. You can use the health that already is. Call it forth. Work the principle. Because it works if you work it. It can't help but work if you work it. The light has to show up If the being of light calls it forth, call it forth, and then let there be light. God bless you.